Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today we're talking with Brandee Sanders, Vice President Marketing for Motive Retail. She is an award-winning woman in tech, a digital nomad, content creator, tech strategist, multimedia digital storyteller, actress and director, as well as Polymath, blending intense creativity, commerce, and content into one dynamic enterprise at a time through data-driven decisions. I love it when I run out of air. Thank you for joining me in the Polymath Polycast.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Every time I have someone read that bio, I'm always chuckling because it sounds like something like a 6-year-old would say, like I'm a princess rocket karate astronaut.
See, I like that kind of thing. It's creative.
So do I. Agility is the key.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things, too, where I like to mix and match, too. So I'll look at different profiles. I'll usually make my own, but sometimes when people like you, when you have your branding on point, I'm like, okay, I'm going to use the way they explain it more. So this is a show for all the innovators in the audience. So can you please say hello to them?
That's awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Brandee Sanders. It's a pleasure to be here. I love the idea of polymath mindset, Renaissance women, Renaissance men, multidisciplinarians. So I'm super excited to kind of cross all the traditional cookie cutter molds that I've definitely amalgamated and broken through my completely non-traditional career approach and personal life approach. So it's super excited to be here. And thank you so much for having me, Dustin.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. And so the way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, wow, that's a really good one. Let's see, something that no one knows. I mean, that's really hard because I'm sure some people would who are not into, who love the mystery, and but I'm low to no ego, so I'm extraordinarily transparent. I mean, something that folks wouldn't know. When I was younger, I was actually somewhat shy. I think the bubble really broke open for me when I started taking dance. So I distinctly remember being very shy. I think my original Myers-Briggs was like INFJ. So certainly not if you look at like my DISC assessment these days, it's like dominate, influence. But I think that I came from that original mindset of like INFJ. And so it's definitely something that I think goes through metamorphosis when you become a leader or someone in your field who manages and works with other people. So yeah, I think that's something maybe people would definitely never assume, which is shyness or any introverted qualities about me at all. I had some of those when I was younger.
Nice. And it's one of those things, too, where a lot of people just don't realize it, especially when you channel it through either singing or dancing, something like that, which takes a bit of a performance aspect. Your personality starts to get infused with that. I did it through singing, through karaoke, so I get it, or even dancing is fun, too. Do you still consider yourself more of an introvert or extrovert?
Oh, God, it depends on the day. Like, honestly, I feel, the pandemic definitely satisfied a lot of introverted needs that I long put as, I was like, wow, this is fantastic. I get, a full 18 months before vaccinations really hit. And I had a lot of time off to put down the neurodivergent ADHD mentality and have to actually focus on things and be in, closed spaces, solo and with very close family members and, my husband and my kiddo. But, I think it does. It depends on the day and it depends on the task. Like there are days where 100% in the back of my mind, there's like the dream of, I'm going away in the bunker. Like I've had it with the humans. I can't stand anymore of the peoples. It's like, actually there will be blood. There was like a great line. I can't remember the line right now, but Daniel says it where he's like the people or something. And like there are definitely days where I'm like, geez, I really should just give up and go live in like an A-line cabin and deep in the Appalachian Mountains where no one could get to me except by ATV. But unfortunately, I live a life, and I can't even say unfortunately, I live a life that I've chosen to like maximize every hour of my life and like fill it with joy and color and food and fun and family and friends and passion for career. And so you can't really do that when you're in a bunker far out in the woods. So I kind of level it out. But yeah, it depends on the day. There are definitely times when refueling, whether you're extrovert or introvert, is extraordinarily welcomed, especially in, tech or any kind of forward-facing audience kind of role.
Yeah, and you with color, I mean, with the vibrant background and earrings, I would not have guessed that you want color in your
Yeah,
life.
this was. It's so funny because I'm going to tell a quick story about fashion because it's fashion is, and I'm trying to remember the Bill Cunningham quote, and I was lucky enough to be photographed by him a few times for the New York Times fashion part of the magazine prior to his passing. God rest in peace, Bill Cunningham. You're amazing. But I remember him saying it was like it's the armor for the banality of everyday life. And on that note, with color is when I was in grade school, middle school, and then all the way through high school, I was the person who was always wearing black. So it was like before Glee was a thing, all the drama nerds wore black turtlenecks, like we're Steve Jobs or something. And we're very serious and reading Robert Frost and Edgar Allan Poe in like eighth grade and like taking ourselves so seriously, pretending we understand Nietzsche, and drinking coffee at Eaton Parks and Perkins at like 2 a.m. But I always wore black. And I remember I found out after I graduated, some of the folks at my high school used to call me the dark one, which I think is fantastic. And I'm so glad. I feel like that'll be my future podcast is the dark one.
Right.
But I remember going and moving to New York very quickly after college graduation. I got out a little early, so I got kind of a head start there. And I stepped into an elevator, and I was wearing, of course, head to toe black because that's really all my wardrobe was head to toe black. And the elevator closed at, I think it was Rock Center. And it was one of those glorious elevators that had the mirror on the inside. So you got to see everyone behind you. And as the door closed, I looked up into the mirror and realized everyone was wearing black too. And I was like, my people, I've come home. Like I'm meant to be here and I've been a New Yorker ever since. So later, as I got older, I realized some of that traditional kind of stoic, cynicistic, I just made that word up. Cynical way of thinking was tied to that manifestation, and it could be a little doom and gloom. And the older I got, the more I realized I actually do love infusing moments with joy, and color brings that out. Like you can influence your mindset from a literal neuropathic, neurological, synaptic way by exposing yourself to it. So it's not just I love it, it's bright and cheerful, because people love to do that. Oh, you must be flaky. There's a lot of color going on here. What are you, a clown? And the truth is that no, it's just vibrance. Literally wakes up your brain. So as I got older, and I don't want to date myself, I started injecting color. So kudos to this background and to my kawaii baby earrings, because those little bursts are actually, they're good for you. They're good to see.
Well, they're good. They're good for you. I even remember watching another interview where you were on. You had that background. I was like, okay, that's a nice background. Yep. I knew that I didn't have to worry about that whenever you came on.
No, I was like, let's do it.
Yeah. And it's funny too because I'm wearing a dark shorts. I was actually wearing a dark shirt before I came on. I was like, you know what? I'm going to switch shirts, get a nice red one that matches the brand, but on top of that too, it gives more vibrance to the video and that kind of thing. So it's
I'm coming for the colors. It's like bang.
Yes.
It's like juicy fruit gum with the dancing zebra.
It is. Well, and I definitely resonate with you too, because back in high school, I definitely was the one that was wearing the black jacket and the black pants, or at the very least dark pants kind of thing.
Yep. Like the what are those? The wide leg. It was like the Hot Topic pants. It was and then it was like the little girl with the cat. I can't remember, Strange Emily or something. Emily the Strange. Like we all wore it. I was too much of a straight lacer to be truly Hot Topic, but I definitely invested in those big old I can't remember the name of the pants. They were super wide leg pants. I go through phases in fashion. Fashion to me is like a costume. I could wake up one morning and be the mom from Beetlejuice and just be some ridiculous hat. We're walking down the street to, 14th Union Square wearing some ridiculous millinery. Or wake up and I feel more Sid Vicious today because I'm mad. And I put on, your heavy studded insane 1980s 20-pound vest and just go tromping through Greenwich. So it depends on the day, but yeah.
Totally feel that. And it's funny too because it does help you express yourself a lot more. Getting into the questions here, what was your mindset 5 years ago and how have you changed since then? You kind of touched on it a bit, but
so I think that when I think back 5 years ago, so obviously I wasn't a mom then, so we can level set on that one, because boy, let me tell you, if you don't have kids, it truly does change. People used to say that all the time. They're like, everything reprioritizes and like, you shift your mind's shut. It goes over here and like everything rearranges. And the truth is it absolutely did nearly instantly when I realized, one, that I could actually have kiddos, and that two, I was about to be a mom. And so I think that 5 years ago, I mean, if I had experienced the pandemic as just like, like not a mom, I think it would have been, like that. It's great. It's World War Z, you guys. Finally, we get to use our MREs or something. Yeah. Oh, how exciting. I get to make custom masks and stuff like that. But I think that it was a little bit different because I was a mom. And so like now there's just this whole other side that's like, breaking generational trauma bonds and like, oh, aren't you glad you got therapy for XYZ issue because you got to clean your slate to take care of another life so that you put that kiddo out into the world with like a positive mindset enabled with all of the good coping and healthy mindsets and like good inner voices and stuff like that. So I think that, 5 years ago, I wouldn't necessarily say all of that was leveled up quite yet because I came into it a little late in the game and I was always a bit of a distracted, on to the next ADHD kind of a mindset. But the past 5 years, I've really learned to slow down, to focus, choose the thing you want to look at, what has the highest value to me, and then learn to say no. And there's nothing more empowering as an adult in the midst of your career than learning to say no. And learning no is just as valuable as being able to say yes to the dream job. Being able to say no is extraordinary. So I didn't have that. I wouldn't say I necessarily had that kind of locked in the past 5 years, but I think that the past 5 years have been extraordinarily metamorphosizing for me. And so it's like the ability to say no, the ability to say, nope, we're not going to get treated that way. We're going to ask for professionalism, for respect, for, this push-pull dynamic to be equal, for stakeholders to bring good things to your life and not just be there to drain. I think all of those things in the past 5 years have been through lessons hard learned, and even further back than 5 years are super valuable to moving forward to the second leg of my career in my personal life. Huge.
Well, and it seems like, too, you mentioned COVID earlier in the episode and just having that whole quarantine. Well, last year when that was a big deal, like obviously still is, but like back then when it was like we were right in the middle of it, doing interviews, stuff like that, it was interesting how people kept referring to it as an accelerant. And oftentimes more in a business sense. But what you mentioned there is kind of like a personal accelerant where your life changed dramatically quickly, not only just because of the child, but also because you had things to do.
Yeah, I just sat with, and I feel so terrible. I can't remember his name, but he's literally an amazing futurist. He's an actionable futurist, and I sat down for him for Modern's new podcast where we were talking really about like B2B SaaS and digital and transformation post-COVID. But one of the things that he mentioned, and this might have been pulled from Forrester, was this great set of data that basically said, of course, like certain legacy industries went through drastic change. Like we saw the boon of Amazon in a way never before because of immediacy, convenience, and contactless delivery. And then everything changed for groceries. Everything changed for automotive. What would have been 20 years to pull some of these stodgy dinosaurs forward happened in like 18 months. Because change was necessary to stay alive. And as you can see, those who could not adapt and stay agile with that, they died. But on a personal level, he mentioned that they had done like query data to people who were returning to the office and people who weren't and were remote work forever. I've been remote more than a decade now, pre-pandemic. And they talked about the fact that they were completely isolated. Social obligations were gone. So it's not like you're taking little Bobby to soccer practice, or well, maybe you shouldn't have, but you were eliminating a lot of the noise of your schedule. And then you were in the same house with the people that, or isolated with those people who usually you're spending 8 to 10 hours away from, and then you've got the commute, and then you've got extracurricular activities, and you've got personal life, and then you've got work trips, and then you've got this. So like what was, 1 or 2 hours suddenly became a full 24.
Well, and not to go too much on a tangent, babe, but I do like tangents on this show. I talk a lot about the 4 pillars philosophy that I go with, and that's the mind, body, spirit, and emotions. And those are the 4 aspects of our life that a lot of people neglect one or more of them over their life. Sometimes they focus on one too much or too little and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that, and to your point, there was a great quote, a woman in tech event. I think it was a virtual event during COVID where folks were talking about moms, because people who weren't fortunate enough to be able to work at home, or people who lost their job, or people who had to homeschool and work full-time at home, which is extraordinary. We have women, these moms especially, who are now full-time teachers. They're full-time educators. They're creating lesson plans. And then guess what? They're also now back to 3 meals a day. Oh, and this other person's home now. And Bobby and Susie moved back in because things went crazy in the city. It was just a brutal crush. And so I think when we think about like pillars, like I know great groups of people, moms, dads, grandmas, the people who stepped up and became like the primary like stakeholder for the households, their pillars were obliterated. There was no self-care. To focus on them. There was, where's their self-care? How can you have self-care when you're doing 3 full-time jobs, not getting paid for 2 of them, and then the other one is just like, maybe we'll bring you back into the cubicle. Like, it's just wild. So I think that there's going to be scars for a lot of folks who neglected those pillars. Sometimes those pillars just, they don't get built because there's literally not enough rocket fuel in your engine to hold it up. So either, you drop the ball. I actually, back to that quote on moms, I remember at the conference, the woman had said, people talk about you're juggling balls and you can drop one. Well, some of them are plastic and some of them are glass. Your children are glass. You can't drop that ball. Yeah. You can't. Are you going to pick it back up? How many families did we see get hit with that shit in the 80s and the 90s where they put air quotes career first, and then there was no such thing as work-life balance, and it was like that 80s aggressive greed is good, kind of boiler room mentality. And so it's balancing. When you say pillars, I think of the balls, and it's like, let the plastic ones drop, but hold on to the glass because you can't get that time back.
Well, and last year, too, I was talking with Mark Schaefer, an extraordinary marketer, and he was talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And self-actualization is where a lot of those pillars fall into. But sometimes it is the survival level. And we were stuck on that survival mode. And it actually kind of made me think of the human marketing aspect, because that's what he was mentioning, too. And this actually goes to the next question pretty well. You mentioned on the Innovation Calling podcast that virality is a very unique thing, and a human element, actually, aspect of it in marketing as well. Do you mind expanding upon that, too?
Yeah, I think so. It's so funny because the Innovation Calling podcast was a fun one. And we tripped across each other when I ended up on there. And that's a great group of folks. Highly recommended. But I think when we talk about viral, so it's so funny because people are always like, I want to go viral. But then what happens after? Like literally what happens after?
They don't do anything. It's very rare.
Yeah, it's very rare that it's leveraged appropriately or that there's any true pipeline built behind it for like, think of it like as a nurture campaign really for like future states, right? Which is why I'm always like, yes, I think virality is, it when you see it, just like, the difference between, gray and eggshell or black and white when you're looking at it. You know it when you see it. And when something's going to be really funny because it touches on some like, general human humor or empathy or terror. When it's going to hit. And you see that happen. I'm always surprised when something comes in from the side that's like a complete outlier though. And I feel like TikTok's actually really good for that. But I think that beyond the immediate virality thing, like when I think about virality and marketing or just like anything forward facing where you're seriously going to be giving it to a real audience, I always think about that as like the sugar rush, right? I think about the marketing, branding, all of that as, right. I think about it as that instant, the huge, massive spikes is like, hey, we just had we pile drive to like a whole cheesecake or cookies. You come down from it really hard, which is why I wince a little when people are like, we're going to go viral with this campaign. Because you're like, hold on there, bud. Like, it's cool. It's a great idea in theory that you just want to be like, wow, get ranking and being like a, some Twitter thing. But the true work comes from the meat and the potatoes, or even more so, just think about it as keto. Like it's just pure protein. It's meant to last. It's a long burn. It grows organically like this. Little increments, incremental, iterative. Sometimes you get good tipping points, but incremental. I always look at incremental because it's very rare in nature that things that are wildly, pendulously swinging, spiking up and down wildly, stay for very long. And rather than just like poof, supernova out with anything that you're doing, that slow and steady wins the race, I think is beneficial. Like beware the charms of virality and that one hit wonder. You really want to think about like becoming a little bit more iconic and longer term. Longevity often gets overlooked for immediacy and what I would just call like hokum, like
go
a
for
gimmick,
the marathon.
a gimmick. Yeah. And you want to be there for the long haul, whether that's your personal brand or some other thing that you're working on.
Well, it's interesting too, because as someone who's in the exercise world, my biggest variable I've always changed has been reps. Doing more and more reps and getting it done that way. And the more you put in, the more you get out of it. And the same thing goes for content. I created the Omni content to be ideally a daily thing I could do, at the very least weekly, consistently. That was the biggest thing, just consistently. That's been a big issue.
Consistency is the hardest part for a lot of people. Consistency and follow through. What's wild is people put a seed in the ground and then 5 minutes later they want Big Sur. And I'm here to tell you, honey, very rarely does that work out. That shit is not it. Where do you look at in nature where there is overnight, literally extraordinary things happening? Very rarely. And do you know when you do see it? When something is usually dying. Like that's when you see poof, like things happening. Like, hey, look, that plant that only blooms like once every 18 years and smells terrible just got huge overnight. Well, it's dying. Oh, I didn't realize. Like the consistency, yes, exactly. The discipline that is required for success. And to you talk about exercise, I could talk about dance. Like I danced for a very long time professionally in New York City and everywhere else. And like the plie is just as important at the base level as it is when you're doing a grand jeté across the floor or very complicated footwork. Like you have to have the fundamental bits down and you have to have them muscle memory, whether that's like an emotional muscle memory or like a physical workout, whatever. Like you have to put the work in and it doesn't change. Get up every day and prepare to be uncomfortable. And when you are comfortable being uncomfortable, putting the work in and building in little iterations, and success becomes a moderate exercise instead of a wish for this unfortunate YouTube influencer virality like disease that we have going on right now. Like that kind of longevity is what will sustain you in a way that is healthier than like the immediate crash.
I've always been enamored with the urge to travel and live abroad, and you are an award-winning digital nomad, so I'd like to ask you about that journey. If you can do swiftly, that'd be great. But if not, what got you started?
I think what got me started is that I was working in New York City, beating the pavement back when I was doing like film production and multimedia and theater all full time. And I was trying to find a way to be able to work remotely so that I could wake up at 8 a.m. and go to MTV for the dance session or, there's a Broadway audition at like 2 p.m. And so I was looking for flexibility, and that led me into e-commerce. So I started my own e-commerce business, launched that, got featured in Inc. magazine for it with Rob Kalin and Etsy. Great stuff. And as a proxy to that, I realized I had more time where I could work anywhere. And that's when I said, great, I don't have to sit here in my tiny little, Bed-Stuy apartment. I can go to where do I want to go? I want to go to Los Angeles for 4 days, or I want to go upstate. Like maybe we'll go to Nyack, or like, hey, maybe we'll go visit the Midwest, or we'll go abroad, or we'll go to Amsterdam. And so I think it all started because I was looking for flexibility, and it lent itself to e-commerce and to remote work. And then as a happy byproduct was like, hey, I actually don't have to do it on the couch in here or at the WeWork downtown on Madison. I can go wherever I want to. And that started slowly and incrementally. And then some of my work too, I had some great like tag teams with travel and educational based stuff. I ended up traveling literally for my work. And it was great actually to be able to see the world and then like earn at the same time. Like it was a blessing.
You're preaching to the choir here. I want to do it so bad. I have so much ideas, but it's
totally there. It's right totally there. Listen, I had no idea what I was doing when I started. I mean, literally, I was learning Shakespeare in doing Midsummer's Night's Dream while people were at Stanford doing CS. Like if I can come in from that back door, I know that there's plenty of other people who have actionable skills that can be done remotely that enables them to have a digital lifestyle. It's about putting down your weekends where you are partying and like picking up Salesforce or picking up CS or picking up HTML or learning Java and having something that you can walk out the door with that enables you to work anywhere.
I have tried to learn the code half a dozen times in
Yeah.
my life. It's not fully stuck, although I did have
Yeah.
to code my website. So I mean, I got a little bit there.
That's where I started. I literally started with like product descriptions for my e-commerce site, and like, what the heck is Meta, and what is it? SEO? SEO.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, that's where it started, and then logging into GA for the first time and being like, what is acquisition? Does that mean where they come from? Like, in that,
Yeah.
you could do it.
And getting conversions, stuff like that. Between volunteering, traveling, acting, digital marketing, directing, and much more, you have a lot on your plate, obviously, juggling all those glass and rubber balls. So how have you organized and managed your interdisciplinary life?
The same way I do work. The same way I would a project. Like, consider my week a sprint. Like, literally consider my week a sprint. Handle that time management the same way you would as if someone were paying you to do it, because your time is so precious. And it's, particularly if you have a family, it's so precious. And we're always trying to, like I said, squeeze the juice out of every piece of fruit that we have. And I mean, I use simple things like Trello is actually really useful. If you're a mom and you're like, hey, we're doing a birthday, or we're going to go on a vacation, or we want to do X, or we're renovating, which was huge for folks during the pandemic. You can build that very easily. Same for Basecamp, Trello, even Jira, depending upon where you are, can be just a great way to organize your thoughts while you're on the go, and then just be able to get stuff done on time.
Well, and project and task management tools are something I've spent a lot of time digging into, and one of the ones I've stuck with was Notion. I don't know if you've played around with it much.
Notion, the wiki, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and it's more than a wiki too. You can do Kanban boards, the Gantt charts, all these great things, and now, especially with the API, you can do all kinds of interconnected systems, and it's
You can
insane
call out
what you
stuff.
can do.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make so many great calls.
Yeah. So something I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
Great question.
Considering the Polymath podcast.
Yeah, it is. I was like, where's that one? I mean, I think it's, when I think polymath, I always think Renaissance, because Renaissance men, Renaissance women, or persons, like, they have the ability to function across disciplines that traditionally are very segregated. So, like, music and theater and the arts is one hemisphere, and quantitative statistical, like, empirical data analysis tends to be in an entirely different hemisphere. Mm-hmm. But people, especially if you look back at some of the, like, great inventors of our time, like Tesla, etc., like, you can find people who came across both hemispheres. They were both creative in nature. They had creative arts, creative background, creative minds, like Michelangelo, Da Vinci are also great examples. They were creators, they were builders, they were makers, literally makers. And then on the other side had a scientific approach holistically that applied to life, that was constantly, like, rebuilding into the scientific value of life, right? Like, quantifying it, but being able to also appreciate the beauty of that moment, not where it's just like raw data that has, like, no story behind it. And so when I think polymath, quite often I think of those large scale mindsets where it's a multidisciplinarian, someone who travels across disciplines that traditionally, starting in, like, sixth grade, they're like, are you a math nerd or are you a theater nerd? Because we're going to separate you guys, because you can't do both. And I would love it when people say that, because I love to just absolutely destroy it and prove them extraordinarily wrong. Like, yes, you can. I love to just go, ooh, is that convenient for you to label that person as just a nerd when they couldn't be an artist too? Wrong, Karen. Like, you can totally do both. You can absolutely be a qualified data scientist and also like to do watercolors on the weekend, or even as your full-time Etsy job, and then turn the hustle into a business on shop or whatever. Like, you can do all of these things. So when I think polymath, I'm always thinking following across multidisciplinarians with extraordinary levels of skills underneath it. Not just jack of all trades. That's generic. Yeah. I'm talking about master of many.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, because we've touched a lot on your more artistic side in this episode, and probably the next time we talk, we'll have to go more into the technical side just to balance it out. But you are definitely a balance. You have the dancing and the arts and the watercolors, but you also have the data analytics and content creation and overall just digital e-commerce presence too. So you have that dynamic duality.
It's a different hemisphere. The duality is definitely there. Sometimes it feels like maybe triality.
Yeah.
Like there's three different things that are in here because you also have the leadership objectives, which straddle both, right? That roll up to strategy, that roll up to, P&L analysis and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's important that you don't let anyone tell you that you can only be one of those things when you can be passionate about many things and you can change midstream. Like there's no problem.
You can change. There's no problem with that. And your life can change however you wish to do it. And I created this multidisciplinary spectrum, and something I just wanted to mention real quick is that people think of like monomaths or specialists and then polymaths, many. But if you're given the words that are there, you could do bimath and trimath too.
Yeah.
Dual specialist or tri-specialist, that kind of thing. And I think that people identifying with that word too might be really nice as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the possibility is really there for you to define that for yourself. And I think that the hardest part, honestly, isn't you doing it for yourself. It's how the people around you who have to go through their own paradigm shift because either your identity is changing or your career path is just flipped on its head. Like you've had people who were like in the city doing like, I don't know, high level finance work who were like, I'm done. And now they're homesteading in like, northeastern PA raising chickens. And like 18 months ago, they were like at, PwC. So, I mean, I think that if anything, the pandemic has kind of proven that you can just flip the script. And given the limited time we have on this earth, I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to do that if that's really where your heart was calling you to.
Well, and just a small little tangent, just like what I mentioned earlier, I started doing interviews during the quarantine. I was doing something completely else. I was working on OmniContent and other stuff. I just realized, as an opportunist, I couldn't ignore this opportunity. There were so many people stuck at home.
Yeah.
They wanted to talk. They wanted to share the knowledge. Flipping the switch, just going straight into that. You know how it is. It's one of those things. Question I really want to get in today is, I wanted to ask you talked about leadership earlier. What do you think it takes to be a polymathic leader?
Servant leadership. Servant leadership across the board, whether you're polymathic or not, because quite often in technology, as if you watch your Silicon Valley, it actually goes into this really well. Technology can lend itself to sociopaths and narcissists, and some of the folks from the echo chamber who love to hear themselves talk, but then actually don't have any, any skills to build tactically or strategically, or that it's just all BS. And you lift up the hood and you're like, this is empty. Nothing's in here. But it looks so good on LinkedIn. What happened? But I think that it's servant leadership is really where every time I create a team, and I did this at Blackline, I did it with, folks appetize modal everywhere, really. You can build and upskill and mentor your team in a way that is supportive. And one of the quickest ways actually to find out if someone is a servant leader is to ask them, and I do this all the time when I meet really talented C-suite or talented VPs or directors, is how many of the folks that you've hired and worked with are now VPs themselves? Where is it? Right. Because that's the legacy I'm trying to leave behind, is bring people from, I came in an admin and I'm making $7 an hour or $12 an hour. And then when I lay my head down for the last time, turn around and they're making six figures because they are a VP, because they were enabled. The door was held open for them and they proved to themselves and went through the gauntlet and came through and learned those skills, took the weekends, dug in, did everything that they needed to do. And now they're going to hold the door open for the person behind them. And that's generational wealth building. Mm-hmm. So like, that's always what I think about when I think about leadership, is like, what am I doing to utilize the talents appropriately for the people that I manage or the organizations that I'm building? And then how do you maximize that? How do you maximize it? Because that's the legacy you leave behind. It's not going to be, it's not going to be your LinkedIn profile. You think they're going to be QR coding that on your gravestone? Mm-hmm. No one cares. It's not going to be your Facebook. It's not going to be your IG. None of that is going to matter. What's going to matter is the legacy you leave behind with the people that you shaped while you were living on this earth, and whether or not it was left better than you found it. And that's like the goal at the end of the day.
Right. And it seems like we're running close to time, so I got one more question here for you. You started working as vice president, so speaking of VP of marketing for Motor Retail. How has that new journey been for you?
It's been fantastic. I think it's super refreshing to join an organization that does have servant leadership and also really does look at the value of data and like integrations. And we were just talking about like API calls a second ago, but particularly for like automotive retailers and OEMs, and it's data science is the new hot thing and data integrations are the new hot thing. I think COVID really accelerated that, particularly for legacy industries like automotive and retail. And it's been absolutely fabulous. Like the folks who work there are all empathetic, wonderful servant leaders, very intelligent, and collaboration is key. And it's been a great welcome and really talented folks. So I'm looking forward to the next few years there and really watching some stellar growth come out of that. So I'm very excited to have joined Motive.
That's awesome. Yeah, whenever I saw that change, I was like, I have to put that in there because that seems so exciting and so new too. It's awesome.
It is, and I love when you step into a room, a virtual room at this point, because obviously Delta, but when you step into a virtual room and you can just feel that there are open minds there who are willing to change the legacy paradigms, to really investigate data, and to build the best possible products and solutions and platforms for their customers. Not just talk the talk where people are like, we're customer obsessed. And then you get into the meeting and you're like, oh, well, what you're saying doesn't sound like very obsessed for the customer. It sounds like we're talking about internal needs over solutions, but this is completely different. It's like super focused on really disrupting and innovating in that automotive retail space with API integrations, et cetera. So one-to-many, just, giving it that wonderful centralization that is often missing when you look at those complex levels of integration. So with DSPs, DMSs, et cetera, I'm super excited about it, yeah.
Yeah, I can tell. It's awesome. And so where can people find more about you? Where can they find you online?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. That one's easy. That's just Brandee Sanders. I'm on there. You can't miss the cheesy header. And then I always say, reach out on social if you ever have questions, looking for mentorship, or even new opportunities. Like I love helping folks find roles that they're passionate about. I have a wonderful, very blessed to have worked with some really talented folks like, Tony Lonnie and just great leaders who really get it and know how to build good teams. So it's an incredible market out there right now for data, marketing, analysts, everything from your SQL folks to your dev, ML, AI people. Like, please feel free to connect if you're looking for that next opportunity, because I love sharing and building people up and getting them the job that, really allows them to take those big leaps. That's
awesome. And obviously coming to talk to you is a great call to action. What do you think could be a call to growth for the audience today?
If today were the last day, are you doing the things that you love? That's it. I mean, if today was the last day, are you doing the things that you love? And even if you have to do the things that you need to survive, are you keeping some tiny speck of your 6th grade sketch notebook who you said you were going to be? Like, are you keeping that person alive? You better feed that inner child, because we only have one. And this life is too short not to give at least a couple of promises that you said you were going to do to yourself.
Love that. That's exactly why I do PolyInnovator, because it's that dream continuing in a new way. So once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and Brandee Sanders on the Polymath Polycast. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. Thank you.